Take a slow look at the people around you right now, at the office, in your friend group, inside your own home. There is always one person who ends up ahead, not through arguments, not through force, not through grinding harder than everyone else. They just end up on top. And the strange part? They are not always the sharpest mind in the room, not the most skilled, not the most dedicated. But they understand one thing that most people completely miss. They understand how human beings actually operate. Here is the hard truth nobody wants to say out loud. Decent people get taken advantage of, not because they are weak, not because they are gullible, not because they lack intelligence, because they walk through life carrying a hidden assumption they never even question. The assumption that everyone else is following the same unwritten rule book. That honest behavior will be met with honesty. That fair treatment will eventually come back around. That extending good faith means good faith will return. In low-stakes, everyday situations, that assumption mostly holds. But the second something real is at stake, a promotion, a deal, a relationship that actually matters, that assumption becomes the most costly belief you carry. Because while you are playing fair, someone else is playing smart. While you are waiting for balance to restore itself, someone else is ensuring it never does. While you are extending the benefit of the doubt, someone else is calculating exactly how far that doubt will stretch. This is not a new problem. 500 years ago, a Florentine official named Niccolò Machiavelli was operating inside one of the most dangerous political arenas in recorded history. Renaissance Italy, where alliances dissolved before sunrise, where loyalty was theater, where the man raising his glass to you at dinner was already considering your replacement. Machiavelli did not navigate that world by being the most righteous person at the table. He navigated it by being the most observant, and he wrote everything down. Not as a manual for becoming cruel, that is, the shallow reading, the one people reach for when the truth makes them uneasy. What he actually produced was a map of reality, of how influence spreads, of how power shifts, of how people genuinely behave when something they want is sitting right in front of them and no one is watching closely. What follows are 7 things Machiavelli understood about human behavior that most people only discover after the damage is already done, after the loss, after the confusion, after years of asking themselves why doing everything right kept producing the wrong results. These are not inspirational reminders. They will permanently change how you read every room you enter. Most people will live their entire lives blind to these mechanics. If you choose to see reality for what it is, subscribe to the channel now. Let's begin with the first principle. Principle 1. Reliable people are the easiest targets. In competitive environments, who gets exploited most often? Not the visibly weak, not the obviously naive, not the people who seem unaware. The reliable ones, the consistent ones, the ones who treat everyone the same whether anyone important is watching or not. And that reliability, that very decency, is precisely what makes them predictable. When you are a genuinely good person, you carry invisible expectations everywhere. You expect honesty, you expect commitments to hold, you expect that treating someone with respect will eventually produce respect in return. Those expectations are not character flaws, but in the wrong hands, they become a roadmap. The moment someone identifies that you give the benefit of the doubt, that you hesitate before pushing back, that you prefer resolution over confrontation whenever possible. They no longer need to outthink you. They just need to understand you better than you understand them. Machiavelli observed this pattern constantly. Calculated people do not target strength. They target consistency. They watch who pauses before responding, who becomes visibly uncomfortable when tension sits in the air too long, who moves quickly to smooth things over when conflict starts to rise. They observe, they map the pattern, then they move, gradually, in steps small enough that each one feels manageable on its own. A minor delay here, a slightly adjusted version of events there, a quiet rerouting of accountability that settles before anyone notices it happening. Each move is small enough that naming it out loud feels excessive, reacting feels oversensitive, calling it out feels dramatic. So the decent person says nothing, adjusts, extends more patience, and the other side registers this not as character, as permission. The answer is not suspicion, not shutting everyone out. It is simpler than that. Stop being so legible, not permanently, not toward everyone, but stop handing a complete picture of yourself to people who have not yet demonstrated they deserve to hold it. The moment there is something about you that others cannot fully anticipate, the entire dynamic shifts, not because you became guarded, because you became harder to read, and people who cannot fully read you cannot easily move you. Principle 2, strategic restraint is not the same as weakness. This one sounds backwards before it clicks into place. Machiavelli noticed something about visible strength that no one who depends on it wants to hear. When you display everything up front, all your knowledge, all your capability, all your awareness, people close. They become cautious. They guard their positions. They stop revealing what they did not intend to reveal. But when someone decides they have already figured you out, they open. They speak more freely than they planned. They move faster than they should. They expose what they normally keep hidden. They show you exactly how their mind works when they feel like the more capable person in the conversation. And all of that is data. Machiavelli called this deliberate restraint, not pretending to be less capable than you are, choosing strategically when not to demonstrate what you know, recognizing that sometimes the most powerful position is allowing someone to believe they hold the advantage while you quietly collect everything you need. The impatient person cannot help themselves. They need to be recognized immediately. They cannot tolerate the discomfort of being underestimated even briefly. They reveal themselves before the moment is right. The patient person understands that revealing too early closes doors, and closed doors cut off information. When someone believes they are ahead, they relax, they rush, they volunteer information they would otherwise protect. They make offers that would never appear if they felt the situation was balanced. And you receive all of it without a single aggressive move. Machiavelli never recommended constant display. He recommended selective display, the right amount of capability, shown to the right person at the right moment. Everything else held back until it actually matters. Principle 3. Every explanation you offer costs you ground. You already know this feeling. You walked someone through your entire reasoning, every decision, every intention, the complete logic of what you did. And somehow by the end, you felt more exposed than when you started, more vulnerable. Not because they challenged you directly, they just listened, asked a few precise questions, nodded at the right times. And when it was over, something had shifted. Some weight had moved from them onto you. Here is what actually happened. You explained yourself, and in a competitive environment, explaining yourself is not communication. It is a transfer of authority. The moment you begin justifying a decision to someone who did not earn that justification, you move from acting to seeking. Seeking approval, seeking validation, seeking their verdict on whether your thinking was acceptable enough to proceed. You handed them the position of judge, and skilled operators know exactly what to do the moment they receive that position. They do not use it immediately. They wait. They ask one more question. They express mild confusion about a single specific point. They pause with a thoughtful look, not to understand better, but to make you keep going. Because every additional sentence gives them more to work with, more emotional language they can reframe, more inconsistencies, however minor, they can file away. What felt like a conversation was a collection process. Learn the difference between explaining and communicating. Explaining is what you do when you need permission to proceed. Communicating is what you do when sharing information serves a clear purpose. Not every decision needs a defense. Not every choice requires a guided tour. Not every silence after your action needs to be filled with justification. Some of your most effective moments will be the ones where you said nothing at all and let the result speak for itself. Principle 4, they do not attack you, they reframe you. The most disorienting defeats are not the direct ones. Direct opposition has a face, a specific argument, a moment you can respond to. The defeats that stay with you, the ones that took weeks to even understand, are the ones where you did everything correctly, conducted yourself with total integrity, gave no one a legitimate reason to come at you openly, and still ended up on the wrong side of the room's perception. Carrying a reputation you never created, walking into a dynamic that was arranged before you arrived, and not arranged in your favor. You could not point to a single moment where someone attacked you, because no one did. They did not need to. Direct attacks are expensive. They create visible opponents. They generate sympathy for the target. Skilled operators almost never move directly. They arrange conditions. They position context. They shape how you are perceived, so incrementally, so quietly, that by the time you recognize what happened, the frame is already fixed. A well-timed word to the right person, a story told in your absence that preconditions the next conversation before it begins. A casual association between you and a failure or quality that now enters every room before you do. None of this looks like an attack. None of it gives you a target to respond to. And here is the most disorienting part. When you name it clearly and accurately, you look like the problem, not because you are wrong, because the arrangement was built with your reaction in mind. Your clarity reads as paranoia. Your accuracy reads as aggression. So what do you actually do? First, see it. That is most of the work already done. Once you recognize that you are inside an arranged environment rather than a neutral one, you stop reacting to individual pieces and start reading the structure. Who is consistently nearby when things go sideways? Who benefits when you appear a certain way? Second, stop playing the role that was written for you. Every positioning strategy depends on you reacting predictably. The moment you decline that role, without explanation, without confrontation, the entire structure weakens. A frame with no reaction to anchor it cannot hold its shape. Principle 5. Fairness only works when both sides are playing it. Machiavelli was not opposed to fairness. He was honest about the specific conditions under which it stops working. When both sides genuinely commit to the same standard, fairness is not just morally right, it is strategically efficient. It reduces friction. It builds something durable. It creates outcomes neither side could reach alone. But the moment one side quietly stops applying the standard while the other continues faithfully honoring it, fairness stops being a mutual principle. It becomes a one-sided disadvantage. This is the trap, and most decent people walk into it not through foolishness, but through loyalty. Loyal to the principle, loyal to the belief that continued good faith will eventually pull the other side back. Calculated players understand this about principled people. They know principled people hesitate to escalate. They know principled people fear being perceived as excessive. They know principled people are more afraid of looking unfair than they are of being quietly and consistently disadvantaged. So they push slightly further each time, testing whether this next increment also passes without consequence. When it does, when restraint is once again read as patience, when good faith is once again mistaken for an open door, they move one step further. Machiavelli stated it plainly: values without enforcement are decoration. They communicate belief. They produce no consequence. And people who have decided consequence is the only language worth responding to are entirely unmoved by decoration. Responding accurately is not the same as playing unfairly. Accuracy means reading the environment as it actually is, not as you want it to be, and calibrating your response to what is real rather than what is ideal. When someone steps outside the shared standard, accuracy does not insist on maintaining your side of it unilaterally. It adjusts, quietly, precisely, with just enough response to establish that certain behavior in your direction carries a cost. That cost shifts calculations faster than any appeal to principle ever will. Stop waiting for the game to become what you believe it should be. Start playing the one that is actually in front of you. Principle 6. The pause is a weapon. Machiavelli watched impatience dismantle positions that had no business being lost. He watched people surrender negotiating leverage simply because silence became unbearable. He watched capable individuals reveal everything they were holding, not because anyone forced them to, but because the weight of waiting became more uncomfortable than the cost of speaking. And the people across from them said nothing. They simply stayed still and collected everything the silence eventually produced. This is the tool almost no one uses deliberately, not because it is inaccessible. Because sitting inside unresolved tension without rushing to resolve it requires something most people never practice: the ability to remain comfortable inside uncertainty. Urgency is one of the most consistently deployed tools in manipulation. Pressure for immediate answers, artificial timelines, the framing that the window is closing, the moment is disappearing, that you must decide right now before clarity has had a chance to arrive. Urgency benefits whoever created it. Stillness benefits you. When you delay, not endlessly, not as a game, but deliberately and with full awareness of why, you fracture the rhythm the approach was built around. They pushed. You did not immediately respond. That alone alters the entire balance of the interaction, because now they are waiting. And waiting produces in them exactly the pressure they were attempting to produce in you. They begin wondering whether they read the situation correctly, whether they move too soon, whether you are more composed than they assumed. The silence you held, without filling it, without apologizing for it, became active. It did something to them without requiring anything from you. And the information that surfaces during that interval, the follow-up that exposes how invested they actually are, the shift in tone that shows they need resolution more urgently than they displayed, is intelligence you now hold. Move when you are ready, not when the pressure instructs you to. Those two timelines are almost never the same. The distance between them is where outcomes are actually determined. Principle 7. Raise the cost of treating you poorly. Machiavelli never promised harmony. He offered something more durable: position. The kind that does not collapse each time someone tests it. The kind that does not require constant defending because the cost of challenging it is already widely understood. And here is the part most people resist. Position is not given. Not because your intentions are good, not because your character is strong, not because you have demonstrated enough value to deserve it. It is built through consistent evidence that certain behavior in your direction reliably produces an outcome that is not worth the effort. Not a dramatic outcome, not a punishing one. Just enough consequence that the calculation no longer favors the approach. This is what Machiavelli meant when he described power as environment rather than performance. Real leverage does not announce itself. It shapes the conditions of every interaction, quietly, before the interaction begins. It forms through what you consistently tolerate and what you consistently do not. Through where your attention goes and where it stops. Through the slow accumulation of moments where you chose precision over reaction, and the people nearby registered it without you ever saying a single word about it. Calculated players operate where access is reliable. They invest energy where responses are consistent. They return to arrangements where the return has always been predictable. When the arrangement stops being accessible, when responses stop being automatic, when explanations stop being volunteered, they do not push for access, they redirect. Because their system depends on return. No return means no reason to continue the investment. Without a confrontation, without raised voices, without a single dramatic moment, you simply become too costly to bother with. This is not about becoming cold. It is about something quieter and far more lasting. Becoming settled in who you are. Knowing yourself clearly enough that someone else's opinion of you does not find anything to attach to. Knowing what you value clearly enough that attempts to confuse your priorities simply slide off. Knowing what you will and will not accept clearly enough that testing your limits stops feeling like a productive use of anyone's energy. When that clarity exists internally, not as a performance but as a genuine state, it moves outward without conscious effort. People sense it before you speak. They sense when limits are real, when engagement is a choice rather than a compulsion, when the person in front of them is not going to unravel under pressure or explain themselves into a vulnerable position. And they adjust accordingly, not because you demanded it, because the environment you carry, built from every quiet choice to be precise rather than reactive, selective rather than endlessly accessible, made behaving carelessly toward you feel like more effort than it is worth. Hear this before you leave. Something happens when you encounter a framework you cannot unsee. It is not comfortable. It is not the clean lift of ordinary motivation. It is something slower, more permanent, the feeling of a lens changing. You look back at a specific moment where you did everything right and still ended up on the wrong side. And you finally have the language for what actually happened. Not to assign blame, not to rewrite what occurred, to carry something forward that changes every encounter that follows. That is what Machiavelli actually was. Not a guide to cruelty, not a celebration of manipulation, a clear-eyed account of the mechanics that were already operating around you, on you, through you, whether you understood them or not. The understanding does not make you harder, it makes you clearer. It does not reduce your trust. It makes you extend trust more precisely to people and situations that have earned it, rather than to every room you enter by default. You came into this as someone who operated by assumed rules and could not fully explain certain losses. You leave with something different, not a weapon, a lens. The awareness that position is constructed, that perception is shaped, that timing is a deliberate choice, that principles without enforcement are decoration, that silence is sometimes the most powerful offering you can make. that raising the cost of mistreating you is not arrogance. It is the structural expression of knowing your own value. The game was always running. You simply now have the language for it. Stay sharp, stay aware, and never compete inside a game you have not taken the time to understand.